Okay, great. So Abby, I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
All right, so let me go ahead. Hopefully you can see my screen all right. All right, so hey everybody, I'm going to be going through basically a presentation to share some of the tips, tricks, and tools for finding OER that I've compiled over the years. But I'll also have some time at the end to go back to ones you're interested in hearing more about, or to show off a few of them and how they work. So when I first go through, I'll just be saying this is what it is, pros, cons, that sort of thing. Then we can come back to things if you're interested in hearing more about them. But all right, moving ahead, we've got first, I want to start by saying OER is a lot of things. A lot of the time folks new to OER will think, well, it's just open textbooks, but it can also be videos, infographics, websites, and everything else you might be interested in that is open, educational, and a resource. So really, that's a really good thing because it means that you can find ways to mix and match OER for your course that doesn't necessarily have to fit into a textbook. This might be a chapter, a whole textbook, video, diagrams, test banks, assignments, images, slide decks, and more that fit your needs. So a better question might be, what isn't an OER? And these are things I'm not going to be talking about today. Library licensed resources like ebooks, blogs and websites that are not openly licensed, or images you find on Google, again, that are not openly licensed, and some open access monographs if they don't have the if they come with a no derivatives license that doesn't allow remixing. So we're not going to cover those today, but everything else, the images, the infographics, the slideshows, all the other types of OER, we will be talking a little bit about. So when you're searching for OER, it's always good to remember that there's a mix of things available. You may find a lot, especially if you're looking in a well-developed field like pre-calculus or another high enrollment entry-level course, or you might find a little bit, like quantitative problem solving natural resources, where it's very disciplinary and niche subject matter. However, if you check in regularly, there may also be new things available. There's a lot of new OER coming out every year. So if a field didn't have anything 2 years ago, I'd say check back in. Maybe you'll be surprised. So that's our little intro section. Let's get into the actual search tools. First, I want to go over a little bit of everyone's favorite thing, terminology, repository and referetory. So you'll hear these terms a lot when you're looking at OER. A repository is a website that houses files of actual resources. Think your institutional repository that has PDFs of articles that are shared by faculty. And a referetory is something that refers to files that are housed elsewhere. So it's a link to something that is shared on another website. A lot of referetories for OER are common because it's a way to easily help people find things that are on disparate websites all over the web, but you can see both in our little section today. So I'm going to start with popular repositories. A few you might already know about are LibreTexts, which is a website that includes both original OER made for the platform and ingested OER that have been copied over from elsewhere and adapted by instructors. The Pressbooks directory, which searches all the books published on Pressbooks that are public and available. NOBA Psychology, which is a selection of psychology textbooks created by the NOBA project and folks partnering with them. And Skills Commons, which is the largest of the CTE resource collections available online. Most of the ones funded by the TACT funds, which is, let's see, is it T, AAA, CCC, T, you know, those funds available on the national level. Now there are pros and cons to each of these tools. Obviously, NOBA's a really great collection of psychology resources, but it's just psychology. Skills Commons is great because it's one of the best places to find CTE resources, but the actual type of content and the usability of it varies widely based on who created it and where. Pressbooks directory obviously is wonderful if you use Pressbooks and you're able to ingest things into your own instance to adapt. But the actual search functionality is pretty basic, and sometimes it'll assume you mean a different word. Just, I typed in fish and it thinks I want bashin. Who knows why? But there are some issues to be worked out there. And LibreText is very easy to browse, but their search functionality is still getting built up. They do have a Commons interface coming soon that will help with actually searching through all the content on their platform. So here's a few repositories that you might have heard of. If you're thinking about referetories, the big one that's going to come up first is the Open Textbook Library, because the Open Textbook Library is where you can find most of the textbooks available online, as long as they are in use or published by or affiliated with a university, then someone can submit them to the library to be included. And this is a referetory because it links out to where things are housed elsewhere. So if there's a PDF housed on an institutional repository, an online copy in Pressbooks or another tool, Open Textbook Library will link out to where that is. One of the really great things about it, though, is that they do host reviews from faculty that have adopted or reviewed the content within the platform. However, similar to what we have with the Pressbooks interface, actually searching the Open Textbook Library is very basic. It's just a simple search of a keyword or browsing by topic. In contrast, Oer Commons is the most robust search interface for any OER repository or referetory. In fact, it's both a repository and a referetory, which makes Oer Commons great to talk about. There, you can create things with their tools, you can post it to the site, or you can link out to external resources that are of interest. This makes Oer Commons a great place to share tools that are already elsewhere. However, it also makes it a very bloated tool to use. There's a lot of K-12 resources on it, which means you have to be careful when you're searching to filter for things at the grade level you want, and also to filter to the types of content you're looking for. And finally, sort of hopping off of that last point about Oer Commons, there's Merlot, which was funded by, I believe, the state of California a while back. It's extremely popular and has a lot of history behind it, but the tool itself has a lot of historical baggage in that way because it can be crowdsourced and supported by people adding content. There are a lot of free but not open apps and other materials that have been added over the years that could mess with your search results in a way. The best thing about Merlot is that you can search by the ISBN of an existing commercial textbook, and it'll search by subject for other things that are related to the topics covered in that tool. So I've got a textbook that I teach my class right now. Let's search for a book that's similar, other materials, and Merlot will bring that up. It's probably the coolest search tool in that regard here, but it doesn't necessarily have the best results. I'm gonna pull up the chat just so I can see what people are saying. All right. And finally, we've got meta finders, which are basically, let's search for all the things at once tools. Mason Oer Meta Finder is slightly different. I want to highlight it because it is a real-time federated search that is actually going out and searching through all of the tools that are included within it at the same time to pull out results. So it's searching a lot of different OER referetories, repositories, and other search tools to find all the things it can. But it also has the ability to search public domain resources and other open access collections, which can create, again, a glut of resources you don't necessarily need. So my recommendation, if you're searching OER Meta Finder, they do have a little checkbox that by default searches only OER specific sites to avoid that sort of issue. Another thing to watch out for, both with Mason OER Meta Finder and with SUNY's Oasis, the other tool here, is that some content is cross-listed because referetories exist, which means that you'll find the same book listed 3 times, once in the Open Textbook Library, once in Oer Commons, once in SUNY's Oasis, and you just have to recognize that that's the same book. SUNY's Oasis is just another federated, not a federated search, but a tool that has pulled in content housed elsewhere to link to them, similar to the referetories we've seen elsewhere, so that you can search through them pretty easily. Again, the search is pretty basic, but the browse by subject feature for SUNY's Oasis is very user-friendly, so it's a nice thing to share with people if you don't want to overload them if they're doing some searching for themselves. And I think that's really where a lot of OER search tools, where the distinction lies, because Mason Oer Meta Finder is something I would recommend to a librarian who wants to dig deep into something, but I would never tell a faculty member to use it because it gives you a whole lot of results, some of which are going to be public domain or open access and not necessarily what you expect from an OER. Which brings me to the things you might want to share with people if they just want results right now. And these are curated collections of content that might be searchable or just browsable. Specifically, there are Oer Commons Hubs. These are hubs or collections of contents created by state groups, consortia, or institutions to collect and share collections of OER that they think are of interest to their community or that have been adopted on their campus. There's the BC Campus OER by Discipline Directory, which is just a press book that someone keeps up with a list of all the OER that have been shared in specific disciplines. And one that I really want to give a shout out is the American Institute of Mathematics approved OER list. So this is a national group of mathematics professionals that have reviewed open textbooks in their discipline, pulled out ones that they think are approved for use, and then have descriptions of them and other software related to them that might be of interest to mathematics professors looking for open textbooks that they know are going to be high quality. Sort of hopping off of that idea of curated resource lists, there are also adopted resource lists. So things that we know are in use or created by or adopted by a particular institution. You can find things like MIT OpenCourseWare, the oldest OER repository available that has different resources that have been created or in use by instructors at MIT. Open Oregon Resources, which is a searchable list of OER in use in the state of Oregon. USG Core Curriculum Resources is the state of Georgia core curriculum mapped out against recommended resources for certain courses. Cool for Ed is from California. It includes both instructor profiles, course information, and a searchable database of courses in the OER adopted for them. Open Washington has some OER in the same vein, and Open Yale Courses is specifically lecture videos from Yale. So there's a lot of different ways you can find both adopted, aligned, or created materials from an institution. And finally, there are specific collections for certain content types, like PhET simulations for interactive simulations in STEM fields, Cubes, which hosts hundreds of teaching materials, reference materials for different STEM disciplines. This might be labs or exercises or lesson plans. And eCampus Ontario's H5P catalog, I always like to give a little nod to because it's a selection of H5P tools and quizzes that can be reused by other people from eCampus Ontario. Now, if you're looking for just the whole textbook or a chapter to remix, you only want open textbooks, I'm always going to recommend the Open Textbook Library first, because although it doesn't have the best search feature or metadata or like back-end heft to it, it is the easiest to get around. And it's managed by the Open Education Network, so I know it's not going to fail and disappear tomorrow, which is always a big deal for things like this. It links to open textbooks that are published or in use at other colleges, reviews from faculty, and specifically one thing I like to point out is the new books list that helps you find books that might be something that you hadn't seen before that you're interested in. So you can browse through what are the newest textbooks that have been added to the collection most recently. And obviously not all of us are graphic designers, so some covers will be nicer than others, but do not let that deter you from the actual quality of the content. Now, if you're looking for open textbooks, it's also important to be aware of open access book collections, because some open access book publishers do put out high quality monographs and textbooks that are not generally included in OER collections because people don't think about them, but they should be. Luckily, a lot of open book publishers' textbooks are available in the Open Textbook Library. Ones I particularly like to point out are those in classical studies, like ancient Greek, Plato's Republic, and readers of other ancient Greek and Latin texts. They have other things as well, conservation biology, international relations, ethics, but there's a lot of good stuff here that might otherwise be missed if you're only looking at OER specific collections and not other open access materials that are available for teaching. Then there's the other things. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's PhET sims and cubes for alternative materials that are not just textbooks, but ancillaries. If you're looking for other open content, I generally say to start with everyone's favorite, Google Advanced Search, because a lot of the time you won't necessarily find something right off the bat with Oer Commons, but you can search. My go-to is to search in quotation marks OER and in quotation marks a topic, just see what comes up on the internet. And you can sort by usage rights to see things that have an explicit Creative Commons license listed on the site or tool, as well as filtering by file type if you want to find specifically slide sets or PDFs or other materials available for download. So this can be a good way to sort of dig through what else is there when all else fails. For videos, a lot of people, of course, will look through YouTube. You can filter for Creative Commons licensed content. Vimeo, similarly, you can do the same. And TED-Ed, which the talks are generally licensed under a no derivatives license, which is not great for OER, but you can still include them within your resource or link to them for additional context. For images, CC Search, which is now called Openverse, is obviously excellent for searching all the collections available online that are open, but I also want to highlight Wikimedia Commons and Figshare for open data and research-related images, and things in Wikimedia Commons can be a large range of infographics, features, and other figures that you might need to use in an open textbook. There's a whole lot to look for. I generally recommend just looking up OER images libguides to see who's collected the best selection, and SNHU has a particularly good list that includes things like women of color in tech to share diversity, equity, and inclusion image collections. All right, so those are the major databases I wanted to cover today, and there are a whole lot of them, so I will go back to greatest hits and to show you what some of them look like in a little bit, but I do want to quickly go over search tips and strategies. Generally, the search process for OER is based on how things are categorized and how good the search tool you're using is. So like I said before, Oer Commons has a very robust advanced search. You need to make sure to select things like the level of learning and the type of material you're looking for when you're searching. But in many other tools where simple search is the default, then you want to start broad with tools like just a general search term like psychology rather than abnormal psychology to see what you can find. As you get more specific, it's best to search for single module or weekly topics. So instead of looking for the title of a course, look for a specific subject you cover in one section. And then as you go through, you need to review this content for basic accessibility markers and other signs that it's right for a course. Selecting those search terms is always going to be an annoying process, in part because everyone uses different terminology. In some fields, there's a lot of very standardized terms for what you're talking about, but in others, for example, student success might be called learning achievement or student advancement. And figuring out what that might be called in different open access and open educational materials is how you're going to be able to find the best range of materials for you. Just because you can't find something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It might just mean you don't know what the right term is to look for, or it's in a different tool that's not indexed by a specific meta finder. And really that's where the issue of finding OER generally comes in, is when people are publishing things to websites rather than to repositories and sharing them in referetories, things get lost in the shuffle. A lot of the time when I'm talking to faculty about OER and locating these materials, I try to make sure that they think about course alignment. A lot of the time, locating materials isn't just, I found a book, I'll use this book and replace my book. It's more like, well, let's find what you need. I need texts, I need slides, I need videos, or I want some sort of reading assignment, I want some sort of audio assignment or exercises. How do I mix and match what I need? So I create something like this example I have here, where you align the topics for each week, the learning objectives that are being assigned, and the specific readings and materials you found that introduce and correspond with those topics. This also helps generally identify where the weaknesses are in existing collections. So if there's one topic you can't find slides for, but you can find them for the rest, or one that you can find exercises for, but not for the rest, that can help you make a case for a potential grant project or development project down the line. So the search process in action, generally I say, first identify the keywords, both the broad ones and the more specific weekly topics. Search broadly in Meta Finders and tools like Google and BC Campus. Curate the content that is most useful for a course based on alignment. Reflect and repeat the search process. And I do have a handout I use for faculty that walks through this process with them to help them figure it out. And if they can't find anything, there are also other fallbacks that most of us use in the OER field, specifically asking for help on listservs. So the CCC OER, LibOER, Open Education Network mailing lists are the three biggest places where you'll hear people saying, I'm looking for something for X, where is it? I can't find anything. And sometimes you'll find that there isn't anything, and sometimes you'll find that, oh, there are 2 brand new books that were just published by Virginia Tech last year. Sorry, we didn't have them posted here. You can find them in the Open Textbook Library. And those are the sorts of nice, helpful conversations we can have, but maybe more usefully, we could make sure to cross-list in different referetories to make sure people can find those things, or that we all are using the same referetories and repositories so we can find the same things. Alternatively, if you don't want to just ask for help, you can check for works that are currently in progress. The Rebus Community Contributor Marketplace can help people find projects that are looking for chapter authors, copy editors, peer reviewers, or just coming soon announcements. And the Open Textbook Library, in addition to that new books section, does have a section on the side here of books that are coming soon. And for example, if you click through to one, it might have more information about the book, the author, and when their estimated publication date is. This one's a little bit delayed. But all right, that is the general search process and what you do if you don't know where to start. Is there anything you guys want to go back to and look at a little bit more closely? I'm not a big fan of this blinking light, so I'm just gonna back out of this real quick so we can get to the slides we want. Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, Abby, do you wanna click on that and show folks that worksheet? I think that's pretty cool.
Let me. Luckily, it's a nice and easy link, bit.ly/OER treasure hunt. I try to set up bit.lys for most things that I'm going to share in multiple presentations. And it is just a very basic worksheet going through the process of locating and sharing things. Identifying topics, searching in a couple of recommended places, curating the content based on certain items, and then reflecting on, did you find something that works? This I just wrote up in about 5 minutes, so it's a little bit more slapdash, but I do find it helps to do a little bit of course alignment in the process of identifying materials as well.
Jonathan's asking if you'll share your slides, and
yes,
I'm
happily.
Will, so
and some of these,
to me, I can send them up to the group.
Some of these I'll say I did borrow from, I believe it's, let me double check. I have it right here. Kelsey Smith and Una Daly, their OER Bootcamp Hunting for Resources is where all of these wonderful selection of hexagons came from.
Very nice. I'd be interested in taking a look at that AIM repository. It's not one that I'm familiar with.
Yeah, so it's really just a list, which makes it interesting. I do hope that I don't know how often they revisit it. I hope regularly, because there's always new things in math specifically. But for example, if you are doing combinatorics, here are 3 textbooks in combinatorics that are open that they've shared. And then it'll tell you how many pages is it, how much does a print version cost, what are the source files written in, where you can download it, and other information. For example, are there exercises and answer sheets, solution manuals, etc.
That brings me to another question. Are some of the stuff that people say they have hard times finding are things like test banks and um, like homework sets and stuff? Do you have recommendations on those, where to find those things effectively?
Yeah. So one example I use for math a lot, let me insert /OER. On our Find OER by Subject math guide that I keep up, I have a section specifically on homework systems and ancillaries. And my open math is really good for keeping in there About Us, Open Textbook Store, the open textbooks that are aligned to homework that they have in their system that's available for use. But the other big one, of course, is LibreText. So LibreText is working on their big Adapt software right now, which is super cool. Excited to see where it goes. But let's see. Commons.libretext. Homework. And you can see, for example, their OpenStax Astronomy has assignments aligned to it. And Adapt is their new adaptive learning system. So it'll be not just homework assignments you can pull in, but also H5P materials and other things. I've not worked with them yet. I'm just excited and watching it with bated breath until it comes out more officially.
Thanks, that's great. We had a presentation from LibreText last fall, maybe. It's been a while. So it's great to see that the Commons is, fully operational now and everything.
Yeah, it's operational, I guess I can share. This is Brian. And I use Adapt, for my specific assessments. I have 350 H5P questions. So I think if she searched on this Commons page for nutrition, I think it would pull up, my library, because I know it's shared, I guess, and things. And so that's an example, of if people want it, that they can find. So let's see, scroll down a little bit. It doesn't seem like it's, there it is. I guess the Kansas State University. So those are mine. I guess, and things, if somebody wants to go and find the resource, or I guess it's the resource, not the questions, looks like in this case, but they're working on
integrating the connection between them, probably.
Yes, they're still finalizing that, as far as getting the connection set up, but I know
it's
that
a great interface. They're doing a great job with it.
Because they had so many things are all over the place, and so it's nice that they're having an interface that's kind of bringing it all together, and things. And so I'm still learning the Commons, interface that they have. But the Libre Studio is where people build the questions typically for H5P specifically. And so I know that you can search there, but hopefully they'll integrate it here, to make it easier and things. Because there is quite a bit that's being either centralized or built, and things. And so trying to make it easier to find this sort of aspect. And then something else that I'm excited about too is they're talking about doing the same thing with like glossary terms, at some point in time, so that if you want to build out glossaries that you can go through, do the same sort of thing we're doing for a problem, to go search and see, has somebody defined this before, and do I like that definition, and try to add that to your resource too.
Yeah, that'll be wonderful if we can get it moving along. But in the meantime, it's still astounding what they've been able to put together here. Yeah, I always wish more people would talk about LibreText, especially the remixer and other tools like that, because you can find a lot of stuff built in their libraries and collections. Here, let me click on chemistry just to give people a look. There's so much. But okay, we'll not give them the whole time.
Abbey, are you familiar with, besides Skills Common, other places to find more sort of career technical or, that side of the house, if you will, that content?
A lot of the time it really depends on where people are sharing and doing things. So there's a good collection of stuff in Oer Commons that people have shared, but the question is how well have they tagged it, as with all things in Oer Commons. There's some really great professional workforce skills books in the Pressbooks directory. I know I looked up one of their There's one specifically, I forgot the word for it, beauticians, because I was thinking about dyeing my hair and I saw, well, there's an open textbook on this. Let's learn how it works and the technical aspects, just because. But there are things scattered throughout. I'm glad that there's not as many specific disciplinary collections, because it would just create more of these. I have to know that FetSims exists to get to this. I have to know that MIT OpenCourseWare is where their OpenCourseWare is. It's nice to know that some people are just using the existing places. But that might also mean that there's stuff getting lost in the mix of their other CTE resources housed on a site that might be openly licensed, but they don't know how to promote it as OER, or they don't know that that's a term in some cases. So we'll see. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but someone else might.
And I know you talked about ancillaries here, but I'm also wondering if you have recommendations for like full course sets of full course materials, because I think that sometimes comes up with faculty that are just don't have the time for extensive discovery and curation activities. They're like, is there somewhere I can just get everything in one place?
Yeah, again, that'll depend on what you're working with to begin with. So if you've got an OpenStax book you're using, there's the Oer Commons Hub for OpenStax ancillaries aligned to books directly. LibreText, as we showed, has the collections of homework software and materials aligned with some books in their system, as with the MyOpenMath system has some textbooks that are aligned with learning sets they have. If you use Canvas on your campus, then Canvas Commons is a place where people share full courses aligned with all the materials you might need. So for example, I have a fake course in Ethics 101 that I used as my example for alignment, where you can see modules and everything. You can just share, upload the course, choose to license it CC, and then other people can download all the materials within it and all the modules already written out the way that you need it to be. So if you have quizzes and readings and links and assignments, then people can just upload it and they've got a full course already written out, and perhaps move things around if they teach things at a different pace.
That's great. And are those things that you can export to in a common cartridge if you
not easily, perhaps? I'd have to check. Canvas is one of those platforms that they like pulling things in, but getting things out can be a little more difficult depending on your proficiency.
Well, they want folks to invest in their platforms.
Yeah.
I
mean, that's the main problem with a lot of these is, well, I want you to use mine, I want you to use mine, I want you to use mine, and trying to figure out how you can cross-list and get things available for everybody.
Do other folks have questions in terms of navigating this landscape and things that they've experienced?
So this is Brian. I would agree. I think Abby's correct that a lot of these tools, you have to be careful who you give them to, because I think that if you want to help people make the transition, sometimes the different repositories and things, or referetories, or whatever it might be, depending on how curated it is, can be more of a barrier, you know what I mean, than a assistance in some cases, because they see so much come back and they feel like it kind of stops them before they even start, and things. And so you have to be somewhat careful on where you are directing them to. And I know, at least with those that we've worked with, we oftentimes will try to get a sense on what they want, you know what I mean? And then we'll give it back, to them, I guess, and things like, we'll do the search for them, and then say, these are the things that we found. Does this seem consistent with what you're interested in? And then so that way they can look and see more curated things that we're able to find through the sorts of tools that Abbey very nicely kind of laid out.
Thanks, Brian. I think that is really important, since most of us are folks that help other people do this. maybe also do it ourselves, but also are help the helpers here. Thinking about how to describe these different tools and the pros and cons, I think, is really helpful.
Yeah. Just for everyone's sake, I posted in the chat a link to my content sharing template, which I created with Shannon Smith over at, oh, is she at Utah now, or she was at Utah and now she's at Idaho? There was one of those connections. She's somewhere now, but she's wonderful. We put together this template to help student workers that are looking for and identifying OER so that they can structure the things they find to give to their head librarian or supervisor to pass on to faculty in a structured, sort of explainable way. There's a section at the bottom, particularly to explain what it means for something to be openly licensed and why it's important to verify that something is actually an OER, because that's a concern we identified with some student workers doing the identification process, that they needed some more training on that being a particularly important thing to note when you're looking for content. But it's a good in-between if you have support on doing some of that, finding things for faculty before they get to, here's the things we found just for you.
Thanks. These templates are really helpful. Appreciate you sharing them and writing them. Tanya has a question for you. If you had a magic wand and could make OER easier to find, what would you do?
See, that's, if I had a magic wand, I could just make them easier to find. I wouldn't need to figure out how to do it. But thank you, Tanya. The hard thing is a lot of the work's already been done. It's just a matter of finding a way to make it better looking for people. So here's the thing. I think LibreText Commons is a very good example of this. LibreText is an amazing tool that a lot of people have used to create good content in an organized way that meets the needs of their course and has a lot of great tools built into it. But for a long time, going to the main LibreText site has looked a little clunky and looked a little bit like a bunch of stuff pasted onto a web page. So now that they've got the Commons site and everything looks all neat and pretty and organized, more people are probably going to use it and get excited about it. That doesn't mean that it's any better than it was before. It was already great, but making it look good is also part of that process. Similarly, Oer Commons has one of the best interfaces for searching, collecting metadata and reporting on, say, alignment for K-12 courses of any of the repositories. But because it has a whole lot of materials in it, including things for K-12 that are going to show up when a faculty member searches for higher ed resources, they're going to think, oh, this is a K-12 tool, and everything's just sort of higgledy-piggledy here, because they don't want to go through the process of learning that search and verifying things. So sometimes using a less intense tool with less things built in, but that will bring you more likely what you're looking for, gets more people invested. So really, I'd just say, let's make Oer Commons look nicer and get more people to use it and to add accurate metadata. Yay. Or to get more things using the type of metadata that Oer Commons uses, because it's, again, one of the more robust examples in the market.
Abby, I have another question from Rachel. Do you have any tips for teaching faculty on how to use these tools, or would you just suggest they go to an OER expert and let that expert search for them first?
It depends on the person, Rachel. I think we've all met with people that are very excited and gung-ho and happy to learn, and then people that are very upset when they have to do more than they thought they had to find what they need. And you can usually identify when you're meeting with someone if they're going to be the type A or the type B between those two. So if there's someone that's willing to work with you, then a lot of the time I would just share with them the tools that are most likely to be easier to use. I would not share Mason Oer Meta Finder right off the bat, unless I know that they're good at digging through things and interested in like figuring out how the search works, because it's a really powerful tool, but again, it takes some finesse. But if they did just need a little bit of support, I'd go through those search tips I said before. Start broad, look for very specific modular topics. Don't be discouraged if you don't find something right away. Ask for help if you need it. And then I'd share with them specific ones like Oer Commons, Open Textbook Library, SUNY Oasis, that I know are on the easier end of things to use and are more likely to bring relevant results.
Thanks, Abby. Being strategic is the key, it sounds like.
Yeah, and if I know there's something else that's harder to find, then sometimes I'll do digging in the back end as well and say, and here's 5 other things that people have shared that I don't think you would be able to find on these other tools.
How often do you need to help folks with sort of like really esoteric subjects, or upper level division courses that are have maybe a small piece of a very large discipline, and how do you go about helping those kinds of folks?
Yeah, those are probably the people I need to help the most often because they're the ones that can't find anything by themselves. And a lot of the time, that process is, let me see if I provided an example for one of my other workshops on plant and soil science OER because I'm constantly working with people on, well, how do I find plant science things in OER for soil science? Because it's very popular here at Iowa State, but not necessarily a huge field for finding things regularly. This hasn't been updated recently. There's a lot more now, so that's exciting. But a lot of the time, it's just identifying those key resources that are most likely to be close to what they need, aligning them with their course, and helping them figure out what might be useful for them. And that might take more digging on my side of things. Maybe it'll take me having to dig through, like I said, a Google search where I look for things that are openly licensed because someone posted a PDF 5 years ago before they knew what OER was, and oh, now we have to get and go talk to the author, see if maybe they're still doing things, would be willing to partner on something new. But it really depends on the field, because in some cases we'll be surprised and we'll say, oh, this is a high-level course that has a very niche subject area. There's a book in progress right now on the Rebus community that people are making, or there's 2 books that people made last year because they got a grant in Virginia or Oregon or Georgia. So that's very exciting to find those things. But if there's nothing, then our backup is always going to be, well, let's see if there's an ebook the library can purchase. Let's see if there's no cost material we can get access to. Because at the very least, we can find a stopgap and then look at developing something in the future if the author's interested in doing that, or if the instructor wants to find co-authors for developing something maybe the next year or the year after.
Great. Other questions for Abbey?
Well, I want to chime in and just say thank you again for this wonderful presentation, Abbey. As you all know, Abbey is, one of the demigods of the OER movement, and I always appreciate her thoroughness, and you just always hit the right level for all of us to figure things out and figure out how to know what we don't know. So it's wonderful. Thank you. And yes, all these slides will be shared and posted to the MAC website, as will those from previous meetings of this sort. So anything else?
Last minute questions, things you were hoping someone else would ask.
Do you see anything in the future happening? I know you talked about like LibreText and they're sort of getting their stuff better connected and organized. Are there other things that you know of on the horizon that will make some of this easier, better?
On the horizon, no. It's a lot of it is either already in progress or just people are exploring right now things to do better. So for example, the Open Textbook Library in the last couple of years added connected ancillaries as a metadata field under textbooks. So you can see if an author provided ancillaries or additional materials, they'll be listed under that section. And that was not available until very recently. So it's an extra piece that people have been looking for and missing that's now available. And I think we'll see more of that, just adding on and building on to the existing infrastructures, which is a good sign because it means we're not going to be losing things like opentextbooks.com back in the day. So we're investing in the things we have instead of building new tools, which is a very good sign for OER generally.
Yeah, maybe it's a sign of maturity in some ways, yeah. Great. Karen asked if your contact information is on the slide and if you're willing to be contacted.
I will add them. No problem, Karen. Thank you.
Great. And Matt wants to know if you're seeing a movement towards open pedagogy and faculty and student collaborations that are adding to the amount of content that's available.
Hugely, yes. The biggest problem with open pedagogy projects generally is where the people choose to share them. We see a lot of Google sites that might not be shared on Oer Commons as well. So just making sure that they end up on a Referetory or another place where people can find them is the big thing, because otherwise they'll be lost to the sands of time, as other Oer blog projects might have in the past.
And speaking of that, is there a process you recommend if folks are creators or curators or adapters to, are there particular referatories or repositories that you recommend folks tag their stuff in so that they're more findable or discoverable?
Yeah. Generally, these three up right now would be the ones to make sure if they're housed, if they're not in, I mean, even if they are. So let's say, for example, you put something in LibreText or Pressbooks, then they'll automatically show up in the LibreText Commons and the Pressbooks directory. But people don't necessarily know to search those two places. So in addition to that, if it's a textbook, then you'll want to get it added to the Open Textbook Library. Then once it's in the Open Textbook Library, you might also want to cross-list it on OER Commons. Now, what this does is it means now you've got 4 examples coming up in your SUNY's OASIS search. However, people will find it. And that's the big thing. At least they will find it.
Are there any guides, like checklists like that for folks out there? Like, go here first, do this. And I'm thinking about, I know some of these work by way of a widget, or at least they used to, and you might have said that already, but I haven't been here for the whole presentation. It would just, even just a single page, and harkening back to the era of pen and ink and paper. Is there a good checklist or how-to on this? Because I know we've got some folks who are developing some OER for CTE, and they don't have an institutional repository or another one that is a natural home for it.
Yeah,
so
I would. There might be. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist, because there could always be someone created something that I don't know about, and I don't want to assume that just because I didn't create it, it doesn't exist. But I don't know of one off the top of my head. Of course, the big question would be, what is the scope of such a checklist? Would it be, if you've created something, what format is it in, and where could you post it to publish, and then where do you share it? Or if it's if you've already posted to publish something, how do you get it on OER repositories and referatory lists? So figuring out the scope of the paper would be the big deal. Yeah.
Okay.
Tim has a question, Abby. I don't think it's weird. Are there API connections to any of these meta finders? I'm trying to get the library system to hook into external resources so faculty only have to go to one place to search.
I don't know off the top of my head. Let me show you Mason OER Meta Finder specifically. So this one is built in by Deep Web Technologies to search all of these as a live federated search, all of these tools for OER, AMSR, BC Campus, DOAB, LibreText, Merlot, MIT OpenCourseWare, OASIS, OER Commons, OER Open Michigan, Textbook Library, OpenStax, etc., as well as public domain resources. So it will pull through all of that. And they do have a widget that you can integrate into LibGuides, which is very useful. However, pulling the content out of it, I know the Open Textbook Library does have an, you can download their, is it Mark Records? I believe it's Mark Records, to pull them into a database or a search tool like Primo. But I don't know off the top of my head if there's a specific API for that. Yeah, I'd ask, they have a specific team working on the back end of this one particularly. So there might be something they could build out from that team that I don't know about, or maybe they've already worked on. Yeah. We use Primo, so it's the first one I came to as well.
And Abby, I can't recall if you shared in your slides, but it would be great if you didn't already put a link into your LibGuide on iOS page, because I think you've done a lot of sort of that work of collating all these things for folks.
Now let's see here. We've got other videos, images, collections, curated collections. Okay, I will put it right here.
That'd be great.
But there are other LibGuides as well that do a very good job of collecting this sort of information. I mean, that's what librarians do, is they try to find all of the disparate things and put them in one place to make it easier. And that's always a difficult process to figure out. Have I gone too far, is the question. Does there just need to be a search tool that does this and not me? Very good question. I will ask myself and not answer.
Yeah, I'm sure every time you hear about something, you have the urge to add it, right?
That's how it goes.
Everyone needs to know about this too. Yeah. Great, thank you. Monique is asking, for those of us who will be introducing OER to hesitant faculty, what are some tips to ease them into using OER?
Yeah, so I have a presentation on getting started with OER for faculty. And sort of the basic through line of that whole presentation is you don't have to jump in 100% right away. You can dip your toe in and try a little bit of OER here, a little bit of OER there. Maybe you just want to try open videos or open exercises or notes, or share students a additional open textbook. Let's say you know that not everyone's going to buy the book, but you want to make sure they have something they can check and learn from. So you share a recommended open textbook that they can use as study material or as an alternative way of learning how things work. That's a good way to help people get invested in learning more about things without feeling like there's a ticking clock of I need to find a whole course worth of materials right now to adopt in fall. Instead, it can be, I identified a little bit here, I tried it out in my course, I liked it or didn't like it, and I know next semester I could maybe look into diving a little deeper.
Monique said thank you.
Yeah, I actually did hear from a student once who said specifically they look up open textbooks to help them learn more about concepts in math that don't make sense from their lectures alone. So they just try to find 3 different ways that people have explained it, and open textbooks are a good way of doing that without having to find books and how they've explained it separately.
Wow. That's
It's
great.
also a great pedagogical tool to say, how would you explain this, and have them write it out, because you can really test for comprehension and as well as develop something that might even be better.
Yeah, that's the open pedagogy way. For those, I'm just going to plug this while we're here. For those who are interested, the Iowa OER Summit was last week, and we've got recordings of all of our sessions and keynotes up on YouTube and on our website. So some fun things here for those of you who want to hear more about any of that stuff.
Thank you.
It was great partnering with Iowa.
I think we got one more question here.
Yep.
All right.
John is asking, to piggyback off Monique's question and your response, would that presentation also be helpful to state leaders in getting faculty on board? Missouri's new in this space and working on ways to get buy-in.
Yeah, that could definitely be helpful as well. Generally, if I have a presentation I give to faculty on getting started, I have a slightly different version that I give to admins and other leaders that leans a little bit more into the, Jenny knows this, return on investment discussions, data, and how open educational resources can improve retention and student success, because faculty care about students learning, and they care about students saving money, and they care about the materials being right for their course, but the data not at the front of their mind. So that's something to just highlight a little bit more in those conversations.
And we recently partnered with OEN on a couple of those types of presentations for several of MEC states.
OEN is very good at that.
Yeah, so Draw, maybe we can share those slides with you as well, and you can, I think they're all open, they were all openly licensed, so maybe you can pick and choose some of that.
And this is Brian. I happen to go through this process within the state of Kansas, and you usually have to educate, boards and things. They don't know what this is either. And so that's a process we had to go through, here as well and things. And I happened to be the faculty senate president at that time and in charge of the Council of Faculty Senate Presidents under KBOR. And we asked if we could do a presentation on OER and how we thought would be beneficial for the system. And so that allowed us to really start moving something forward in that way. Because they didn't understand what it was, but now that they do, now there's some appreciation of why they understand why this would help. And their latest strategic plan even had a piece, in it. It's small, but they at least recognized OERs in it and things that definitely would not have happened in the last one. So
Thanks.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Yeah, never assume that people understand what you mean when you say OER. I only did it in this meeting because I know that you guys are a group that already talks about this, and I didn't want to give you a definition right off the bat. But yeah, thank you all for coming. Sorry for the folks having to leave real quick.
Well, thank you very much, Abby. This was a great presentation, very helpful, perfect, perfectly suited to what we were looking for. So we appreciate you and all your support. And if you want to just send your slides to me, I'll make sure to get them out to the group. And then for our group, we do have another session coming up in actually just next week. We ended up with two sort of back-to-back. So next Wednesday, we're going to hear from Jess Mitchell at the Center for Research and Design at the Inclusive Design Research Center on her FLOW project, which is all about making OER materials and educational materials more inclusive, which I think will be really great, and the different ways to use technology to do that. So hope we'll see you again.
You guys are very lucky. The FLOW project is amazing. So
yeah, so hope we'll see you again next week, and we'll be sending out the recording and the slides from this session as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much. Take care.